Hi, everyone. I'm so excited. This is Laura Powers, and I'm hosting this Intro to Real Estate Investing panel with some amazing experts. I'm so excited to have all of our participants and experts here today. So a little bit about myself. My name is Laura. I'm a psychic medium. I do a lot of different things. I describe myself as a creative entrepreneur. And as I started to make more money, I really felt the need to learn more about money and how to invest properly and how to be smart with money, because I didn't really have that growing up in my family. So it's really been something that I had to undertake on my own independently. And, if you don't know how to handle your money and you just get more, you actually will not accumulate more money, which is
Your
the
money will
desired
handle
goal
you.
for I think most people. So even though I would not describe myself as a real estate investment expert, I'm a novice, but I do know all these amazing people that are better at it than I am, that are farther along in their journey. And in talking with all of these individuals, I realized they had so much amazing knowledge to share. And in particular, focusing for new investors, lots of great tips and tools. I think it can be somewhat intimidating to start investing in real estate when you're a beginner. So part of my goal for this panel is to try to break it down, make it simple, and inspire people to know that no matter where you are, it is possible to get started in real estate investing. So that's just a little bit about me and why I wanted to host this panel. And I'm just going to start. We're going to introduce the experts by one, and we'll dive into some questions and answers. So first, I want to introduce Henry Washington. He's an author, entrepreneur, and real estate investor with more than 70 rental units and dozens of house flips under his belt. Henry built his rental portfolio in just 3.5 years. So I just think that's so amazing. So, just think about like 3.5 years from now. And I was talking with Henry in my podcast, and I just said, look, this is like the length of a bachelor's degree. We think of investing the amount of time in your future for a degree, but that's basically what Henry has done and had these incredible shifts. Henry is the newest co-host of the Bigger Pockets podcast and cast member of the Bigger Pockets show On the Market. So thanks so much for being a guest, Henry.
Oh man, so happy to be here.
So I'm just anything in first you'd like to say before we introduce the other guests?
Oh no, man, I'm just happy to be here. This is super cool what you're doing, and I'm very, very passionate about real estate investing as a vehicle to build wealth. And I love how you mentioned that, like, if you don't learn how to handle your money, like I chimed in, your money will handle you. And it's like everybody who is wealthy owns property, right? So even if you don't use real estate to build your wealth, most people then put their wealth into real estate to grow it. And so I love that you're trying to educate people on how to not only make money, but then how to continue to have that money grow. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a huge goal of mine. And now with inflation being, it's what, 9%, or, it's incredibly
9.1.
high. Yeah. So I think it's more important now than ever. And Harry and I met actually at this sort of podcast real estate investing track. And I was just really struck by Henry's story and how, he didn't have a lot of money saved up. So we'll get into that a bit later, but I just wanted to give people that background, and that's how we connected. And it was really inspiring to me because I want everyone to know that you can get involved in real estate, even if you perceive that you don't really have capital.
Yeah.
There's always a way. All right, so pleased to have you. Let's go to Mike Denman, an award-winning filmmaker based out of Denver. He's worked in marketing and advertising for video games since 2011 and real estate since 2015. He's been at the forefront of technological advancement and connecting people to content through internet apps like Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and many others.
Yep.
Adapting his real estate advertising tactics to encourage higher amounts of web traffic to short-term rental listings was possible due to his years of iterating the process. He's been a real estate investor for 4 years. And I love that. We actually met through this film industry in Denver. So, and actually, I have learned that there's a lot of people that are in film and TV that really use real estate investing to build this platform, which I think is amazing. All right. So, Mike, go ahead. And sorry.
No. I was just saying, real estate is powerful. And ultimately, like when we met, even,
your podcast was first starting off and kind of seeing where all the trajectory went. And then you realized real estate was totally a thing that you wanted to get into. And then I separately with Patricia, we ended up going through the real estate investing side because she was like, I want to get more into real estate. So yeah, it's cool. It's a natural progression, but from two different angles.
So Mike would love to hear if there's anything else you'd like to share after the intro.
Well, I think that fun thing about like, the whole how we met at the Women in Film Media for Colorado division. So It was a female-led organization that still allowed male members, and I was part of their marketing committee for like a year or something like that. And so that's when I met you, and ultimately all the trajectories that we've gone. It's interesting because of your trajectory, like where we met and your podcast blowing up and all these little kind of pieces of the puzzle. So having the real estate aspect be something that you found is like, I'm going to put money into money making things. And this is a surefire approach because everyone knows that you can increase your wealth with real estate. And so it makes sense that a lot of filmmakers and other people who are like, yeah, I have all these things, but I don't have a traditional 401k or I don't have a traditional whatever. And so, of course, real estate becomes some sort of really cool add-on to it. But yeah, I mean, it's all super fun stuff. But
what I'll say is not everyone knows. That's why we're here.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't think everyone knows. And I think if you are in a creative work, that's often not as reliable as like a regular paycheck because you tend to do a lot of freelancing or any other kind of freelancing work where you don't have a kind of regular paycheck, then I think something like this that can build wealth and have income that's not tied to a paycheck, I think is really valuable as well. And one of the stats I heard recently is that the average millionaire has 8 or more sources of income. And so I think it's also just great for diversifying. So even if real estate isn't your main thing, what a powerful thing to be able to have that at least one of your sort of pockets of of income.
awesome.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So next guest is Patricia Berman. She's a real estate investor since 2014.
Right.
Patricia's real estate journey began in 2014 with purchasing a primary residence and selling it 2 years later with a nice appreciation, and repeating that process while holding the previous primary residences and renting them out as long-term rentals. After a long stint investing solely in Colorado market, she recently expanded to Iowa, Texas, and California. In 2022, Patricia took her love for hosting and service and dove into short-term rentals and is successfully doling out hospitality and managing her 2 vacation properties with her partner, Mike Denman. Currently, Patricia is writing a book on leverage, and she hopes to help other people find the courage they need to jump into real estate on their own terms. Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Patricia.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk about real estate. I feel like, I've spent a lot of time listening to Bigger Pockets and realizing that there is a way that there's a style of real estate for everybody. Mm-hmm. And there are so many ways that you can dip your toes into real estate and be successful and get that stream of income happening for you, no matter what you do, no matter what your strengths are. And I'm found what I love. We are invested in some long-term rentals, but now short-term rentals have really souped up our portfolio. Yeah. And I just, it's not for everybody, but I love it. And I think that that's the important message is find what you love in real estate, do it on your terms. And that's what we're doing. So I want people out there to know, like, you can do this and it's important to build wealth.
I completely agree with you. And another reason I wanted to host this panel specifically is that there's so many different ways to approach real estate. Like the more I got into it, the more I realized, wow, you can flip, you can hold for long-term and do long-term rentals. You can do short-term rentals. You can do
house hack.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many different ways, multifamily. And so just to open that door for people to see the different ways. And I love that in your case, you're actually doing many of these different models. You're not doing just one, but, based on your personality, one or more approach might work for you. So if you just think that, it's just about flipping or just about, short-term rentals or whatever, just to open your idea about the different ways that you can approach this and find a real estate investing pattern and, a method that works for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be one thing or another.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I am going to introduce Monica, but it looks like maybe I lost her for a second. So we will come back to her. I'm sure she'll pop back on momentarily. While we're waiting for her, I'll just go ahead and introduce her though. Monica Sawyer is the host of the top related podcast, Real Estate Investing for Women. Her expertise and joyous laugh have been featured all over the world in over 50 podcasts, on stages, radio and TV stations, including ABC, CBS, Fox, and the CW. Her multi-million-dollar real estate empire is just one example of her ability to strategize, organize, and implement big business plans. She is the best-selling author of the book Choose Bliss, The Power and Practice of Joy and Contentment, and has built a multi-million-dollar business through real estate. Monica teaches others how to create a blissful and abundant lifestyle, and she has traveled to over 55 countries and loves to teach others. So we'll wait for her to hop back on and have her add anything else. But I'd love to just start with a question to the panelists, which is, if you were just starting from square one, what do you recommend for, like, I have never invested in real estate, where do I start? What do I do? What do I learn? And I see Patricia getting really excited at that question. So yeah,
Oh, so you're going to let me go first?
Yeah, we're so animated that I figured I should.
Well, it depends on age, right? But I think house hacking is one of the best ways to start a real estate portfolio, because especially in today's market, when you're looking at something where interest rates are rising and there's a little bit of uncertainty in the market, so you might just you use what you have. When you purchase as a primary residence, and you're going to have access to lower interest rates, you're going to have access to reduce your overhead by either renting out extra rooms in your house, or if you don't want to share space with other people, you can get up to a 4-unit property and rent out the other units. So I am a big fan of house hacking. We even did it as a family where we had one extra room and we rented it out to women who were single moms and stuff like that. We vetted super well, and it worked out really well for us. We made a lot of lifelong friends that way. And it's just, I think that's one of the best ways to get started. Obviously there's many, but that's my go-to.
Yeah, there's so many ways to go about it. And one of the things that's interesting to me is, even when it's a tough market for buying and selling as a whole, it's still a good rental market. So,
right.
So just to keep that in mind, that even if it's harder to buy something, that you actually might be able even more easily to rent it, because people that would be buying aren't buying.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So either Mike or Henry, I would love to hear your responses to.
My response is the same as Patricia's of this kind of stuff, because that's the trajectory. What do you think, Harry?
Wow, man. So getting started is super intimidating to people. And it's even more intimidating now, given the current economic environment. And, people are concerned that, am I buying at the top of the market? People are concerned, am I paying more for the money via higher interest rates? Is there going to be a crash, right? This war overseas is pushing prices of commodities up. And so people are just like, is this the right time? Well, the answer is it's always the right time, right? It's just a matter of what and how you buy. And so when I'm talking to people about getting started with real estate investing, the majority of it is about your mindset around real estate investing. We've all mentioned it multiple times already in just the short time we've been on this show, and there's so many different ways to invest, right? And so a lot of those ways to invest are gonna be more beneficial for one person versus another based on their financial situation, right? And so to be able to tell you this is the best method for you is not easy to do without knowing what your financial situation is or what your super strengths are, right? And so what I think people should focus on is first making a decision, deciding you're going to buy property, even though you don't know how, right? Even though you don't know how, you don't know, maybe you don't have the down payment, maybe you think you don't have the credit, maybe you just think you can't find the property to buy. There's all these factors that are going to come into play that we will tell ourselves is a reason we can't do something. And so take all that off the table and just say, I am going to buy a property in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, right? Whatever that is for you. And just, you have to make that decision in your mind and in your heart. And once you are solid on that decision, you'll figure out a way. Like the how will reveal itself to you. You'll listen to Laura, you'll listen to Patricia, Mike, Monica, you'll hear something somebody says, and you'll hear about a path that maybe makes sense for you. Just like Patricia just talked about house hacking. Maybe somebody who's made the decision to start investing in real estate didn't know about house hacking, but now they know. And so they're going to go do some research, and maybe that's how they get in the game. And so like when you're starting out, it's more about just deciding, no matter what, I'm going to figure out how to do this, and I'm going to do it, period, point blank. And I promise once you've truly made that decision and you keep immersing yourself in real estate investing, culture, information, knowledge, surrounding yourself with people who are successful real estate investors, you will figure out a way to do it. There's a way to do it with no money. There's a way to do it with some money. There's a way to do it with other people's money. There's a way to do it when you buy deals on the market, off the market, like house hacking. There's short-term rentals, long-term rentals. One of these strategies will make sense for you. You just have to make a decision that you're going to continue to educate yourself and surround yourself with people who are doing it until that path reveals itself, and then you got to go down that path. I mean, that's really what I tell people who are getting started.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great.
Yeah, and you're not alone.
That's right. That's right.
So I just came in, forgive me, I'm having internet problems too. The universe is saying something today. I'm not sure what that is, but anyway, so I just heard what Henry was saying. And, you know, one of the things that I say on my podcast is goals without action are just dreams. So get out there and take action and create the life of your dreams. And I think that's kind of what everybody here is kind of stating is that first, Henry says you have to make a decision. Everything in our lives starts with a decision and a choice to follow that decision, right? And then once you make that decision, action has to follow, because otherwise it's just words in your head. And so I loved what Henry was saying, and I'm so sorry that I missed Mike and Patricia, what you said, but it's really important that we make a goal and then make a choice to take action towards that goal. That's how we create the wealth that we want and the blissful life that we want. I do want to go back and just make a couple of comments about what Laura said and what Patricia was saying is that, so Laura said that most rich people have 8 sources of income. Don't misunderstand that by thinking that it was 8 sources of income that you work at.
That's right.
It's not.
Right.
Most of those sources of income are passive. And the things that rich people work at are the things that they're passionate about. So they'll have one thing maybe that they are really passionate about and they pour their heart into, but these passive sources of income are what really create the wealth. Henry also said that most wealthy people own real estate. That's true. They may not have made their money there, but that's where they put their money later, which is kind of what Laura is doing now, right? She's totally modeling that for us, which is beautiful. Yeah. Right? So just understand 8 sources of income does not mean you need 8 jobs. And passive income is the key, right? And real estate is the most stable way to get that passive income.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I want to say is there are a million ways to make $1 million in real estate. Choose one. Like Patricia says, there are so many, right?
There are. And you know,
yeah. Go ahead, Patricia.
And you know what I did? And the other thing, like action doesn't, like to build on what you were saying, I think that action doesn't need to look like you went out today and you purchased a property.
Yes.
Start listening to podcasts like your podcast, the Bigger Pockets podcast, and listening to all of these successful people who have done it in different ways. And when you hear one that makes you excited, like, oh,
that lights you up.
That sounds great. I mean, that's what I did. And I was like, even after I had already become a real estate investor, I think I was listening to I listened to one with Ziana McIntyre. I listened to one with Avery Carl, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get into short-term rentals. So, it's just, you have to kind of listen to your gut and your heart, but you have to start consuming that information, because that's the
to even be exposed to it. That's the only way that you're ever going to learn what the opportunities are out there.
Right. And maybe for some other people, it's not listening to the podcast. Maybe it's going to meetups, because those are another way to immerse.
And that's such a big, networking is a really, really big deal. Thank you so much for mentioning that.
And our community of investors is so huge and so welcoming and helpful that, it's just like, get in where you fit in,
Yeah, and understand that it's because someone else is successful does not mean that you have to do it their way. So I love what Henry was talking about, is he built all of this passive income in 3.5 years, right? I retired myself in 15 years because that's the goals that I had and the choices that I made for my own lifestyle, right? I traveled to 60 countries during that time. I danced, right? Like I have all these other things that I love to do. So although I wanted passive income to retire, it didn't need to happen in 3.5 years. I had the time, right? So as you're looking at what is going to fit for you, understand that Monique's way or Patricia and Mike's way or Henry's way or whatever Laura's way turns out to be, I'm excited to hear, whatever our ways are opportunities for you to learn, but it's not necessarily going to reach your goals in your way. And the way to stay blissful is to make sure you understand you and create a strategy that supports your own joy, as well as your own wealth. You can have both, right? So
I love that.
Yeah. So I hope that was what you guys were looking for, Laura.
Absolutely. The next question that I have is, what is your first real estate investing story? What got you into real estate, and how did you get started? Let's just start with you, Henry, because that was actually one of my sort of reasons to host this panel, was hearing your story at PodFest.
Sure. Yeah. I got started 4.5, 5 years ago out of desperation and panic. I literally had a panic attack. And I had a panic attack because I was freaking out that my wife was going to figure out that I sucked at money in dollars and wasn't going to be able to afford to provide her with the life that she deserved. And I came to that conclusion because prior to us getting married, we got married fairly quickly. And so I met my wife, and then we got married 365 days later. And so to the day. And so that was a quick physical transition, but as far as mentally and financially, right? Those things didn't move as quickly as we did, as when we decided that we wanted to get married. And so I had a wake-up call. When we tried to buy a house together, right? We did all the things, I felt like I did all the things that society tells you to do. I got good grades. I went to school. I got a good degree. I got a job. I was doing software development and data analytics for Walmart. And so I was making great income. And so we get married and we go to buy a house. And I'm like, this is great. I make twice as much as she does. We'll be able to afford this great house. And the bank pretty much called me one day and said, hey, if you want your wife to be able to buy a house, you can't be on the loan, because my credit was so bad and I made money, but I didn't have any money. There was $1,000 in my savings account. To a bank, I wasn't really bringing anything to the table other than the fact that I had a W-2. And so that was a big blow to my ego, to, just me as a person who wanted to provide for my new wife. Just kind of got punched in the gut as far as my ability to be able to do that. And so I had another wake-up call when we were having a conversation one night. So my wife bought that house and allowed me to live with her. And so once we moved in, we did the other thing married couples do, which is talk about your future and kids and dream houses and vacations and things. And like, that's supposed to be a fun conversation. And it just wasn't for me. I was terrified because I was like, man, I just like a dream house. Like, we barely got in this house. So I don't really know how a dream house is going to go. Like, I just knew I couldn't afford, and it was a starter home. You know, it was a nice home, but it was small. And so after that conversation, we went to bed, and then I woke up at 3 a.m, sweating and panicking because I knew she deserved things that I had no idea how to afford. I had $1,000 in my savings account. I had bad credit. And so I did what anybody would do. And I started Googling, how can I make some extra money? And that brought me to like discovering terms like passive income. And I was like, yeah, how can I make extra money without doing anything? That's even better, right? And so I started Googling like how to make passive income. And that led me to articles on Bigger Pockets and YouTube videos just around people who invest in real estate. And that was my first, like the first time I heard that real estate investing was something that normal people did. Up until that point, I just assumed like super rich people in big companies and things owned real estate, and that's the way it worked. And so like, it was just like eye-opening moment for me to see that like, wait a minute, like normal people, like people with jobs and kids and families are owning property, and they do it all the time, all across the country. Like it was mind blowing to me. And so I ended up watching this TED talk from this kid who was like 20-something years old and he had like 20-something properties. And the whole goal of the talk was he was financially free, and he used rental properties to get there. And I was like, well, if this kid figured out how to buy 20 houses and be financially free, like, well, I can do it. And I literally went like, oh, well, I'll just do that. with my bad credit and $1,000 in my savings account and being denied for the loan for the house that I was actually living in at the time, like I decided at 3 a.m. that I was going to buy real estate, right? And so that's what I did. I woke up the next morning. I woke up my wife and said, guess what? We're going to be real estate investors. And she was like, sweet, let's do it. And so I didn't know how to do it, but I had made a decision, right? And like, I think, you know, Lauren, I talked about this when I was on our podcast, but when you decide something, like the suffix of the word decide is side, right? Like suicide, it means to kill off, right? And so there's no other option but to do it when you make a decision. And so once I did that, I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll just go find people who do it, and I'll just hang around them a lot until I figure out how to do it. And so that's when I discovered like RIA meetings and real estate meetups. And I literally went to every meeting that, if there was a meeting in my area, I got in the room every single week, month, consistently. Like I just wanted to learn and surround myself with people who were doing it so I could learn how to do it. And between that and just telling people I was a real estate investor with only $1,000 and bad credit, I just started telling people I was a real estate investor because I'm just a believer in like the universe gives you what you put out, right? And so if you don't put out there that that's what you are and that's what you want, then why is anybody else going to believe you? Why are the things that you're looking for going to find you? They have no reason to. And so I just was like, I'll just tell people I'm an investor, and hopefully that brings me the thing that I want. And that's 100% how I found my first deal. Somebody heard that I said I was a real estate investor. It was a friend of mine, and he was like, hey, I heard you're buying property. I got to sell this house. I got to sell it in 30 days. Can you buy it? And I was like, yeah, I can absolutely buy it. I had no clue how to buy it at all. And so I ended up putting that property under contract, and I found out how to do that because I literally Googled how to buy a house without a real estate agent, and it said put it under contract. And so I Googled what's a real estate contract, and then I downloaded one, and then I changed the names and we signed it. And that's a terrible idea and people shouldn't do it, but I did it because there was no other, like I just was like, I'm going to figure this out. And so then I had to buy it, and I took it to a bank, and the bank said they'd give me money as long as I had 15% of a down payment. And they said, do you have it? And I was like, yeah, for sure I have it. I didn't have that either. And so And then I had to go to my group. And so that was the power of networking. You had mentioned it before, Monica, like networking is so powerful. And I 100% agree. I think people don't leverage networking enough. And I feel like everybody networks, right? Everybody goes to a meeting or two and they network, but that's not networking. That's just going to a meeting or two. Networking is consistently showing up and consistently being around everyone who's doing the things that you're doing. It's not just going to a meeting or two, it's committing to being consistently in those circles, because the more consistent you're in those circles, the more people see you as an expert, the more the universe is going to send the right people and deals and things your way. And so I was so consistently in this group that I had now this network of friends. And you mentioned it, Patricia, that like this investors group, like they're just so helpful. They want to see you succeed. People want to help you out. Like, I think you hear wholesalers like somebody's going to steal your deal. No, it's not like that in real estate. Like, it's more so somebody's going to like help you make money on your deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's so
Everybody's
true.
so helpful. And so I literally went to my network and I was like, hey, I got this house. It's a great deal. I don't know how to buy it. How are you guys buying it? Right. And they literally talked me through how to go find the money, which somebody said you can leverage a 401k to buy it. And I was like, sweet, I will just now have to go find a 401k. And so, and my wife had the 401k. And so I went to her and was like, hey, remember that time I said we're going to buy property? Well, we need to borrow $20,000 from your 401k to buy this house. She said, let's do it. We bought the house. And then the bank called after we bought it and said, hey, that house had a bunch of equity. We'll give you a line of credit on the equity so you can go buy more deals. And so just like that, I went from a panic attack to owning a house 90 days later, and then the bank calling me and saying, here's 20 something grand to go do it again. That is mind blowing when you're panicking about money just 90 days before that. And so that's my intro to real estate investing. That's what changed my life. And once I bought that first one and saw how powerful it was, I said, I'm going to buy as many as I can, as fast as I can. And so that's how we got into it.
I love it. Such an inspiring story. Like I said, that was a big, motivation for me to host this particular panel. And I love this because so much of this is about faith. It's about your, just making a decision that something's going to happen, even if there are the perceived idea that you don't have the resources or you don't know how. And also just get in the room, meaning connect with the people that are doing it, learn from them, get connected with a supportive network. Also, just briefly, the panelists, I figured I was going on. Apparently, my computer was decided to download a software update. Even though I had previously set it not to do that, it apparently overrided that. But we're also doing this during the full moon, so that can lead to interesting technical things.
Yeah, totally.
Makes sense.
All right. So next, I'd love to ask that same question to Monica, with just for you to share your, intro story to how you got into real estate investing and what happened for you.
Yeah. So my interest story to real estate actually happened before I was born. It started with my parents. So they had an arranged marriage in India and came to this country with $200 in their pocket, and they didn't know each other very well. And suddenly they're starting a new life because things were bad in India. They wanted a better life for them and their family. And one of the things my dad had heard is that the golden ticket to wealth in the United States was to buy real estate. So they're kind of thinking about this. They want to buy a primary residence, whatever. My mom's a doctor. My dad's an engineer. My mom is literally saving all of her nickels and dimes that she makes. She's sewing little cushions for her sofa that she made, and she's making curtains. Just imagine this doctor, right, doing all these things and saving every nickel and dime so that they can buy real estate, because that's the dream. Then I'm born 2 years later as their first child, and filled with that feeling of love and joy and hope for this new baby, they finally bought their first home. So they bought their primary residence. And then they were also able to buy an investment property soon after that. So they bought their primary residence when I was born. 3 years later, they started their investing journey. So it's been in my life, my whole life. Fast forward 15 years, and they were able to pay for my college education and my wedding with real estate. Wow. And they did the same for both of my sisters. So my whole life, I had seen what real estate could do. I had also seen my dad's stress, tenants not paying rent, dealing with the different mortgages, juggling all the different phone calls from their tenants and the toilets and the termites, right? We hear about this stuff, right? And this is what scares people away from it. So I saw that, and I have to tell you, I had dug my heels in. I was like, I do not want that life. One of these things that I learned about real estate was it's a long game. You know, you want to be in there for a long time. Well, if I was going to do a long game, I was not going to do something that made me miserable. I was clear on that, right? So I had decided, no, thank you. Graduated from college during a recession, couldn't find a job. I had a great degree from UC Berkeley, couldn't find a job. And I remember one day sitting with my dad, just like, how am I going to do the adulting thing? Like, what's going to happen to me? Right? And my dad said, you know, something to me that night that changed everything. He said, you know, Monica, everybody has stress, everybody has fear, and everybody has money problems. Do you want poor people money problems, or do you want rich people money problems?
Amen.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's
And
so
in that
profound.
moment, first of all, I realized rich people, right? Well, my first thought was, rich people have money problems? Really? Like, they do, but they're better
More money,
problems.
more
I'm just saying. So my whole mindset changed, right? It was like, oh my gosh, I want this. So I got a really low paying job. I just took whatever I could get, like swallowed my pride, whatever, UC Berkeley degree, whatever. I just took whatever I could get, very low paying job, and did what my mom did. I started saving nickels and dimes so that I could buy my first piece of real estate. In the meantime, I fell in love. My sweet husband and I decided we wanted real estate. And so for our wedding, we asked everybody no gifts. We wanted a down payment for the house. So everybody gave us money. We put together $10,000, and then we went for an FHA loan. Put down, actually, I think we tried that, didn't work for us. We put down 5% on a $200,000 property. We were completely broke. But we had this house, right? This is how we got in, and we house hacked. Okay, so in those days, this will date me. In those days, we called house hacking getting a roommate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
We got a roommate. Right? And that's how we afforded our first house. And so we lived with this roommate for a few years. We got an equity line on the home once it had appreciated, and then we did it again. We rented this out. So that's how we got started, and the rest is history. Now, I will say this. My very first house rental home was a nightmare. It was just like my dad's, because that's what I had learned. That's what had been modeled for me. And we sold that first property. My husband's like, you are so going to regret this. And he was not wrong. We got rid of that property because I was like, I can't stand this headache. But then with the next one, I was like, you know what? I realized again what real estate could do for us. So I made another decision. Thank you, Henry, for that decision idea, right? I made another decision that this was going to be the thing that I did, but it was going to be happy for me. And I was going to create my own model, I was going to streamline my own processes. I was going to create something that I could live with for the rest of my life, which is what I did. So that's kind of how I began. And I just, for the first 4, 5, 6 years, I would buy something primary residence because they're the easiest to get into. Right? They require the lowest down payment. The loans are easy to qualify for. You have to pay a mortgage anyways, or rent anyways. You might as well pay yourself. And then I'd buy another primary residence, rent that out, buy another one, rent it out. That's how I got started, until eventually I had enough equity in my homes that I could go shopping. It was like Monopoly. I think I'll buy 10, but it took a little time to get there. And I had given myself the time, right? I wanted to do this in a way that felt good to me. So that was my journey.
I love it. And I think it's important to just focus on, that do whatever you need to get it going. And it may not feel easy in the beginning. I mean, when you're starting something new, there's a certain amount of resistance you have to work through. That's one hard part. And then the other thing is like making decisions that maybe in the short term don't feel the best, but in the long term are really going to be beneficial. Like, okay, you have this pocket of money and you're putting it into the house, so you don't have that money anymore. So that can feel not so great, right? You're like, oh, I don't have that 10K or, whatever it is that you put in the house, or, I'm getting a roommate. Like you said, that was the early
Or house hack.
real estate hacking. Yeah, house hack. But in the long term, that's going to be a good decision. So not to get too caught up in just, whatever's happening in the moment. If it fits into your long-term vision for yourself, just know that it can be worthwhile. And I think it was on another podcast I did with you, Monica, where you talked about how, when the recession hit, the housing crash, and, that you made the tough decision to move out of your house and rent it so that you could keep it, so that was not easy, but then in the long term, it was absolutely a great decision for you.
I love that, Laura, what you're saying is that really there's no clear path to wealth, right? And the people, one of my coaches said to me once, the person with the most flexibility wins. And so if you're able to flex, if you're able to, the word pivot was used during the pandemic a lot, right? If you're able to kind of dance with what's happening out there in the world and in your life, you're going to be able to create more of that wealth more easily, right? There were so many people that were in my situation that lost everything. I mean, I lost several $1 million in 6 months in 2009, in 2008 and 2009. But I made some different decisions than other people. I didn't freak out. I didn't get scared. I didn't think the market's never going to come back. I just decided, okay, this sucks. What am I going to do? And what I was going to do is hold my properties, and I was going to figure out how to make it work. So all of us have choices in every moment. And our knowledge, like Henry, Patricia, Mike, everybody's talking about, get educated. Because as you're in those environments and you're hearing the conversations and you've got that education, it makes it a lot easier to do that dance and to pivot and to change your strategy based on what's going on, because now you've got a wealth of information that'll help you to build your financial wealth.
Right.
So great. And
real quick,
yeah, go ahead.
Real quick before you go on, I just want to say, Monica, that story just made me want to give your mom a big hug, to come over here with $250 and she starts saving her nickels to help buy property. I just want to hug that lady.
Yeah, I do too. My parents are amazing.
They are, yeah.
So blessed.
I love that. And I think that's another thing to stress is, we're going into what seems to me is likely to be another recession here, with inflation being so high, and we'll see how long and serious this goes, but it still can be a good time for you. And that doesn't mean that it's not a time to be in real estate, or that you're going to lose everything. Like, you just have to be aware and make smart decisions based on what's happening. And with that determination and will, I just think you can still make it work even in this perceived challenging time. And actually the most millionaires are made, and billionaires too, often in times of economic downturn. So what is challenging in some ways is just a bigger opportunity in different ways. So I think so much of this is about reframing as well.
Right.
And Laura, I don't know if anybody has said it yet, but real estate is the best recession resistant vehicle to invest in, because rents go up as inflation goes up. Right. So, and there's other factors too. That's oversimplifying it, but real estate really is the vehicle that can help us to weather that inflation storm, depending on how you invest, but
for sure.
Yeah. And I think it was you and I, Monica, we were talking before about how everybody needs a place to live, right?
Right.
Well,
Why
we're
pay
still in
somebody
our
else?
bodies. Maybe eventually we'll be fully in VR, and that won't even be the case. But like, at least for the perceived future, people need a place to live. Like, people always need that, whereas some other things are negotiable, right? But you need food and you need a place to live. So in that sense, it's a very stable.
Real estate is a finite resource. It really is. And so I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially in areas where growth has already happened. And there are restrictions on, open space and building and that sort of thing. So considering the idea that it's a finite resource, you got to get yours,
And now,
Absolutely.
where people can work from remotely anywhere, it's opened up a lot more different real estate markets that people hadn't necessarily considered living in before, because they're like, well, it's not accessible to my job. And now these rural markets, which have amazing properties or
Right.
incredible rents,
Affordable.
affordable properties.
Right.
Like even when
And-
we went up to Iowa and we
Right.
started doing our long terms in Iowa, it's like it was kind of this scary, okay, first out of state kind of thing, like freaky.
Yeah.
But still it works out because it's like different areas have different regional economics, and ultimately when you can invest with lower amounts of money but still bring in some cash flow, it
And
works.
we cash flow beautifully on properties that we purchased for $125,000 each. You know, it's just people need places to live. They need nice, beautiful spaces. And, you know, just to build on what Henry said and what Monica said, I think it's important in real estate to you want to sit with yourself and figure out what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what do you want to do, what energizes you, because ultimately the best way to be successful is to be authentically yourself. And I try to tell people this all the time: be authentically yourself. It's a struggle. It's a struggle for us. Like every day, I'm wondering, like, oh, maybe I should do this, but that doesn't really suit me. So, you know, I'm trying to always center back to being authentically ourselves. And when you are, you have more potential to get further, if that makes any sense.
And a comment
yeah.
on the whole flexibility thing.
I just want to say that I love that Dr. Seuss quote, you know, be yourself, everybody else is taken.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's important. And a
Exactly.
comment on the whole flexibility thing, right? Like if you're ultimately not a real estate investor and you think about being flexible, right? It's like that uncomfortability of having a roommate or those things where you wouldn't necessarily normally do it. It's like, yeah, if you move out of your house for a little while, which I think like we've all done now, right? Move out of your primary into another primary, get that primary going. A house is where you make home at that moment, and it's kind of like a thing you build on. But you get a little bit uncomfortable for some periods of time, and you have to be okay with some of those levels of comfort. It's like, yeah, you can go a couple of years without having like a walk-in closet that you totally love. If you have a place that like, this is gonna be great to rent out, and just spend a year there, then you move on to the next primary, right?
Yeah.
Wealth is built just outside of your comfort zone.
For sure.
Yes.
And you know, one of the things,
Mhm.
I'm so sorry, Laura.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things I actually tell my tenants is, you know, you're paying my mortgage, you should consider paying your own. Like I tell my tenants to leave me.
Yeah.
And I'm telling everybody, leave your landlord, because you're going to pay
Right.
somebody's mortgage, right?
I know.
And when I
know.
moved out, when the recession got tough and my husband lost his job and stuff like that, when we moved out of our dream home, we had built our whole life together. He and I have been together 25 years. We had built our whole life together. We finally bought our dream home, and now we needed to rent it out. We moved in, just so you know, he finally got a job. We moved into a dump. When I walked in there, it smelled like dog pee.
Oh,
Everything
no.
inside had been spray painted gray. I mean, it was horrible. I walked in there and literally broke down crying, but it was all we could afford. And I will not pay rent. We had to buy.
yeah.
Right. And so, because that's one of my policies, right, is I don't pay somebody else's mortgage. So whatever we could do is what we did. And it worked out beautifully in the end. But yes, that flexibility thing is so important. And it's your power. It can be your superpower, right?
For sure.
To really build that flexibility muscle.
Yes, I agree that. I mean, this is good for in life, not just real estate investing, right? But the whole picture. Well, we're getting close to the end of the hour. I just, Patricia, Mike, I wanted to give you guys briefly, if you could just share a really brief version of your first real estate investment, and then we'll kind of wrap up for the panel.
I'll start because what happened was I'm originally from New York. I grew up in Brooklyn. This is a very rent culture city. And unless like your parents had generational wealth and had a home that they owned already, you typically rented and and you don't buy because it seems so daunting and scary. Well, I moved out to Colorado in 2011, purchased my first home ever in the beginning of 2012 for $305,000. 2 years later, we sold it for $400,000. And I think that was a little bit of like, oh my goodness. Even to purchase that house, we took loans. I took a loan against my 401k to make that happen. And I love paying myself back. That's the beauty of like taking a loan. I didn't know how to, like Henry said, I didn't know how I was gonna like fund the down payment. And I thought I would just take money out of the like a disbursement, but I was researching and found out like you can take a loan against your 401k, you pay yourself back with interest. And I was all about that life. So and by the way, I also learned it doesn't hit your debt to income ratio. So that's just a small tidbit for people out there. And then I was bit by the bug. I bought another place in 2014 for $245,000. I sold it 2 years later for $320,000. And I was like, I am getting into real estate. And I made that decision because this obviously was working out. Like, why wouldn't you get into real estate? Like, this is crazy. Obviously, the Colorado market had appreciated quite a bit, and it still continues to appreciate year over year, crazy numbers. And that's where it was. I started with just renting out a room. Then we moved out and bought another place and rented that place out. Then we moved out of that one and rented that place out. And that's how we built our real estate portfolio, gained access to home equity lines of credit. And, you know, just that's how our journey began. And now last year we sold one of our most appreciating properties and we jumped into short-term rentals.
Yeah, she's like, we're going to invest in short-term rentals. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and so we jumped into the short-term rental market with a lot of appreciation that we had gained on a house that we owned in Golden. And here we are today, and we're doing really well. And we own 2 short-term rental properties plus our long-terms. And we plan on continuing this journey, purchasing long terms, maybe purchasing another luxury short-term rental. So
yeah, and I think that the craziest thing about all this is like normally my business, I do advertising, and I do advertising mostly for video games and real estate as well, because I like it. And so when she started doing short-term rentals and came to me saying, I'm not getting any bookings. And I was like, oh, it's okay. I'll just run some ads. And she's like, don't tell me it's okay. It's like, you can't just say,
yeah,
it's okay.
like, we have a mortgage on this place. What are you talking about? Like, do you know what the mortgage is?
I'm like, yeah, it's all good. And so like, I just started, because I've been running advertising on Facebook and Instagram and different things like that for so long, especially for real estate. I was like, oh, this is gonna be easy. And then so I started running ads for short-term rentals, and then it got really easy. And we were able to bring in massive amounts of people and increase our law of averages to get bookings.
It worked.
And so it's like, and now I have this little like lever I can turn on and off, and she feels like, oh, we're getting views, we're getting bookings. I feel like it's normal. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool. But I've been able to take that and create a system, help out a bunch of other short-term rental hosts, and develop even advertising methodologies for them to follow, so that way they can find success on their own. I've actually pivoted my business a little bit to focus more of that this year. And I wrote a book on short-term rental advertising and how to, and I have a whole bunch of things happening that ultimately, it's a little weird, but I mean, like in the grand scheme of things, it's like, it's the real estate investing side of things then shifted and pivoted where my day job really focus was. And now I'm like, well, I have more fun and a little bit more exciting times, and I get to talk to all these cool real estate investors. And instead of just making the videos for real estate investors who are like a 20-year-old kid who learned how to wholesale at 18 and has like 30 properties, which is amazing. But I was like, I don't know how to do that. Just to Henry's point, is like, you have to surround yourself with these people. And ultimately, when you start really talking to other investors and you find the different flavors of real estate, it's like there's all these things that you can end up benefiting by just providing services for it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'm glad that you guys brought up short-term rentals, because that's a really viable option. It's a very different business model. But I was talking with a friend here in Las Vegas who has 3 short-term rentals that bring in about $1 million a year. Like,
wow.
Yeah,
Good for them.
That is serious.
So just, I mean, it can definitely be like real income, and you have to know the rules and everything. Certain places it's allowed and not allowed. And, you know, you do all the whatever you need to do to make sure that it's legal, but it can be a really viable, you know, path to income. So
it is. And there's been a huge influx of investors who are rushing to short-term rentals, but I think that's where Mike comes in, because if you're treating it like a business, you should be advertising it, and you should
Yeah.
the more people who see your property is casting a wider net of people who are likely to book your property without just, waiting on the platform to get you
Mike, let's talk.
Yeah. With the meeting, like there's going to be a lot of cross pollination.
Oh yeah,
happening here within the panel itself, and
it's cool.
I'm excited for all of you guys connect. I literally was like, I can't wait for you guys all to meet each other. And for anyone who's listening, either the podcast or in the various YouTubes or whatever, I love these panelists. I think everyone can already see how amazing all of these individuals are. So much knowledge in different areas, different backgrounds, which I love. And if you want to further your connection and learn more about real estate, I'm hosting an 11th month real estate magical mastermind. I'm calling it magical because I know that it will be. It starts this fall. All these fabulous panelists are experts in the class. I'd love to have you. You can find out more about that course on Powers Hour, so POWERS, Hour, HOUR, like the hour of time .biz, and then you can just look under the classes. And I would love to have anyone, feel free to reach out if you have any questions about it. It's at bookings@laurapowers.net to contact me. I just want to thank all of you guys so much for your time. I'm excited to see what happens, to hear more about your journeys and to learn more, because even though I'm hosting this real estate class, I'm learning from all of you guys, and I'm so grateful. And I know that everyone's going to learn from you as well. So let's just go ahead and do kind of a quick, any final closing thoughts that you have that you want to give out to people as we wrap up. And I'll just start kind of bottom up on those as I see people on my screen. Let's start with Monica.
Well, I kind of already gave you my closing, right? So goals without action are just dreams, right? So take action. But I do have one other thing that I just want to mention that I think is very relevant, because we're not all real estate investors or whatever, but just remember that bliss really is your birthright. So choose bliss every single day.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right, Henry, how about you?
So I gave some mindset at the top of the show to talk about how to get started. So I'll give some tactical at the bottom of the show. So actual tactical things you can do to get started investing in real estate. So you have to put the blinders on because it's so flexible. There's so many ways to get started. It's going to be overwhelming. There's so many options for you. And so find the lowest common denominator among all the options. And that is typically always going to be a good deal. It doesn't matter how you're going to monetize a property. If you're going to flip it, rent it, short-term rental, long-term rental, wholesale it, wholetail it, like all of these strategies require you to buy something at a discount that's a good enough deal so that when you add value to it by fixing it up or putting tenants in it, or furnishing it and renting it out, that you can turn a profit. And so if the lowest common denominator is finding a good deal, then that's where your focus should be. So don't worry about all the other stuff, right? Don't worry about who's going to finance it. Don't worry about who's going to work on it. Who's the contractor going to be? Who's my title company? Who's my real estate agent? None of those things matter really until you find a deal. So go find the deal. Figure out what a good deal looks like in the market you're looking to buy real estate. You can do that simply by networking and asking people what they're buying. And then figure out how you're going to find those good deals. You can literally Google, how do I find under market value real estate deals? And you'll get a ton of options. There's direct mail, there's cold calls, there's on the market, there's off the market, there's all these strategies. Pick the one that you think you can implement the easiest, that you can apply the right amount of money and time to, and then do it relentlessly consistent until you get a deal. Once you get a deal, you'll be so motivated to go figure all that other stuff out that I've mentioned before, because you'll have that thing in your hand that you so worked hard for. You'll go and people will line up to give you those resources because now you've brought them something of substance. So take everything off the table, put your blinders on, figure out what a good deal looks like, then be relentlessly consistent about finding one until you do.
Oh, that's fabulous. Great tip. And Patricia and Mike, any closing thoughts for the two of you?
Well, I'll just start by, saying, like, be authentically yourself, sit with yourself for a little while and figure out what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what do you like to do as it relates to real estate? What do you think you want to do? What are you willing to try? And then take action on those things, learn more about how you can get involved. And you know what? If you try something and you don't like it, you don't have to stick with it. Like we said, there are so many different ways to get involved. And most importantly is like start educating yourself about the different ways, or well, not, or what it is you want to do. So
in real estate, I'm sorry, in the corporate world, Patricia, we call that a SWOT analysis.
What?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
You sit down and do your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You write them all down. And
Yes, and
that's your plan of attack.
Yes, and make the decision. Make the decision today. I'm going to get involved in real estate, and that's right. Like Henry said earlier, that's what you got to do. And don't lose yourself in it.
Yeah, and I think that one thing I'll leave off with is even after you've dove into something, it's okay to spaghetti test. Everything is a test. It's ultimately not anything you have to commit to. And when you try something, and I try like a bunch of things at once, and I see what sticks, what resonates, what really kind of reflects the value that we have. And I think that the reality of like, investing in the short terms from long terms, where we hadn't done that this year, and I was like, freaky thing, right? And then being like, okay, well, I know systems that work, and I know the ways in which we can increase some of the viability of it. And so as you go into something, there are always ways that you can increase the effectiveness of it. Always ways that you can get more investors to even add on to it, syndicates. There's all these things that you can do with other people's money, even in seller financing options, finding those off-market deals and getting people to even be involved in like you renting from the person who owns it and just paying them their actual like fee instead of a bank. And then you take over the actual deed later on. I mean, there's all this different stuff that it just takes conversation and trying it out. So I think that it's cool. Explore. Be unafraid to try new things.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, everyone, for participating. I really appreciate your time and energy, and I'm excited for the mastermind. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Good meeting you guys.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Thanks.
And thanks everybody for listening. If you'd like more information about me, you can go to my website, powershour.biz. You can find me on Twitter at Laura Powers, Instagram at Laura Powers 44, and also on Facebook. Thanks for listening.